Now I'd like to show you the control room specifically for surround sound mixing use. So we'll get back to the control room for ADR and other stuff, but this is a bit involved because it involves routing. And do note that there's one key difference between the control room here between Cubase and Nuendo, which I will point out to you. So your control room is part of your audio connections over there, and you can have it floating around, but it can also be built into your right pane here, and it says CR there for control room, and it's disabled. So you can click on enable there, but a better way to do this, because it allows you to do all the routing, would be to go to audio connections, and over here you switch it on. So if it's disabled, it looks like this, and you switch the on button. It does have channel settings. That's how you open the floating version, but you can see that's the same as the one I've got on my right hand pane there. So I'm just going to use the built-in one, and you'll notice that it expands to a monitor channel here. That is a little monitor icon, and the Cubase control room allows you to have inputs, talkbacks, cues, headphone mixes, and monitors, and there's a limit to each one, but those limits are quite high. Now, the first thing I need you to understand is that this control room's just for listening. Nothing you do in here will affect your main output, your main bus, or your mix, or your export. If you make stuff louder or softer or route it differently, it does not affect the actual audio busing. This is really just for listening. But it does create a lot of useful features in terms of talkback and metronomes and cue sends, and as I'll show you now, some surround listening features. It does also have some loudness meters and other things built in on top of that. But to start you off, I'm actually going to remove this monitor so we can start with a blank control room. And what you want to do here is actually add a monitor. This is going to replace your output speakers here, and I'm going to call it my surround monitor, and it is 5.1 surround. And you can see nothing is connected here, and if you go to our output tab, those are mostly still connected. Some of these reset. Now here's the very strange thing that might be counterintuitive to you. You do not want any audio to go to this main bus. In fact, Cubase won't allow it to duplicate, because if I've got this monitor one selected here, I can't select it here. It's red. It shows you it's duplicate. And if I try to select it, it tells you that it's already in use. And if I select it over here, then it will switch it off over here. And that's the key difference. In Nuendo, it allows you to assign more than one of the same bus to various outputs. Now the downside is you can duplicate stuff and have double signal when you don't want it, but the upside is you can set up very complicated A/B setups and surround and stereo setups simultaneously, which Cubase doesn't allow. But what you need to understand here is your normal output bus. Those should all not be connected. But here's the weird thing, is you do need this bus. Without this bus, you have nowhere logically for the audio to go and nowhere to export. So without a bus, there's no way to export audio, even though you might be able to hear it. So you do need the surround bus. It needs to be set up for 5.1, and it needs to be set as your main mix. But we are now replacing this for listening purposes with the control room and our surround monitor here, and that is then set up in that same order from 1 to 6, from left to right surround. So please, it won't allow you to duplicate, but keep in mind you do still need this bus. And here's our control room. And for now, this is all that we need. And I do note that for every monitor that you create, it creates another letter over here. This is monitor A, and say I was in a very fancy studio that happened to have 2 different surround monitors. So maybe I've got my near field one right around me, and then I've got another main monitor further away. Then you can have those 2 separate monitors and say your sound card allows that, which mine would, because I've got 10 outputs. So I could go here and patch, I've already used 6, but I can patch some of the other ADATs or other digital outputs. Say I patched all of those for those outputs, then I can A, B literally here. Now I'm hearing the near field surround, now I'm hearing the main or far field surround. Now I don't have that, I only have the one surround here, so I'm going to delete this again. And when we get back to Nuendo, I'm going to show you how we use this kind of feature to use this not for, say, two different surround monitors, but for a stereo and surround. And in my studio, I actually have it set up to have two different stereo pairs and then the surround, which is quite useful to do. But as I said, for now, we just need the surround monitor. Other things you might want to do is headphone mixes and cue mixes and talkback channels, which we'll cover in a different video later on class. So here is my surround output with the correct channel order, and that's patched to the control room. So for starters, nothing will change. It'll sound exactly as before. I am the very model of a modern major general. I've information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. One nice thing is now you can set your monitor level. If I want to listen to my mix 6 decibels softer or a little bit louder, I can do that, and that will never affect my export. This will not mean that I'm setting master levels and changing balances or anything. This will just affect my listening level, and I can double click and set it to 0 again. There we go, many clicks, and we're not using any of this. What it also does is automatic downmix presets, and that is a very useful feature. So I've told you in class about setting up a project in surround, even though you might want to deliver in stereo, and it's this control room that makes that quite useful. So I'm doing my surround mix, it's all in surround, but now I want to hear, does this automatically fold down to stereo? I just click here, now it's going to play back everything from 5.1 down to stereo. So you can look at the downmix presets here. At the moment, I'll cycle through 5.1 down to stereo to mono and back to 5.1 again, which is useful, but you can add other ones. If you want to hear what would my 5.1 mix sound on quadraphonic or on LCR. And you can also configure the downmix preset by going to mix convert, which is Steinberg's standard fold down tool. Now a fold down tool, all it does is similar to what I've done manually over here with my screen recording. It moves the rear channels to the front with a certain amount of attenuation, and it puts the center speaker as a phantom center with a certain amount of attenuation, and it does the same for the LFE. So I'm not going to show you these buttons now because they come across elsewhere in the control room, but this is a very common standard for stereo downmix, but depending on the setup where you're mixing, you might want to tweak this. But the standard is a good one to start with, and as I said, this is just what you're hearing. This does not affect the export that you will be doing at the end of the day. I usually have the channels open and I just use this button to toggle. Now you might not be doing surround, but I also use this control room to check fold down mono compatibility. So if you just do mono, it's going to add those signals together. Do be aware that to check proper mono compatibility, you do want to have a single speaker soloed after you do this. Either send it to a center or just have, say, your left speaker soloed. So check both because as you've learned, a mono signal phantom center is going to sound different to a single speaker reproducing that mono signal. So that's the basic thing that you have here. Then the thing that I find really useful is your channels here. Now you can see that's your surround sound layout. And again, that's got nothing to do with mixing. This is just monitoring. But for starters, you can solo stuff. So I'm playing this surround track. I just want to hear my center channel. Or left surround. Which is a very quick way to test stuff in your mix to see how it comes through on certain speakers. The plus in the middle, that's your LFE or your subwoofer. But now this row of buttons below is also super useful if you are sitting in a surround sound studio, but I've also used these when I'm doing a little bit of work on a surround project when I'm currently just with headphones or a stereo setup. Now, the first one just solos left and right. The second one solos everything in the front, but have a look at this one. This solos your surround channels, very quick and easy, but the fourth button, it lets you listen to your solo channels on the center, or it lets you listen to your solo surround channels, on your front channels. So say you are guessing what something might sound like, rather than having to mess around with your mix and the panner, you can just quickly hit that button, listen to what would have been behind you, and imagine how this all blends together. This is not a solution to do final surround mixing, but it is useful to hear what it sounds like. And also it means you don't have to turn around. You can still look at your computer and your mixer and hear actually with greater detail, because of the psychoacoustics of your ear in front of you, what those channels will sound like. So that is your control room. We will get back to that with other uses that it has. One quirk that I want to point out to you is that if you are using the control room, that monitor output level has some other places where it might confuse you. So this I haven't introduced to you, but if you hit F5, you get your media bay, which is an amazing way of finding certain sounds. Now, I actually just want to filter for audio files. This Cubase isn't set up to find my entire audio library, so I don't know if it's going to find anything. Let's tell it to find something on the desktop. That should be fine. It's just scanning lots of things that I've just left on my desktop. What can I play back that's not inappropriate? So here we have a clip, very useful. I'll cover the media bay later on, but this preview level, be aware if you set this, that's useful to check low-level sound effects. Again, command-click to reset that. But if you've set this preview level low and you're using your control room, that also makes this preview tool much softer. Be aware of that. Understand why it happens, but it's a bit of a quirk. Reset this guy first to unity gain before, although modern, clicking on files with this play tool. Otherwise, it's going to be quite soft. And that's it for our control room for now. Play around with it. As I said, there's nice meters. You can see this is a class compliant either RMS meter or a loudness meter. If I've got that enabled, you'll see it measures my loudness. It only gives you 1 bar here, but it does work in 5.1. Loudness meters do go for multi-channel audio as well, and you can set up that meter properly here. But I'll show you this guy again when we talk about loudness meters in audio finishing techniques. So I hope you are not overwhelmed by this control room. It's a very useful feature. I always have it enabled because of those features that I use, and I will show you some of the extra options that you have for using the control room innuendo.